I want to be very clear, right up front, that I did not know it was a seat. In my defense, nobody labels a chair. There is no little brass plaque that says the most dangerous man in Pittsburgh sits here. Please do not rest your tired feet. There was just an empty chair at the big table in the back of Marconi's, and I had been on my feet for 9 straight hours, and I sat down in it for 30 seconds to fix the broken strap on my shoe. And the entire room stopped breathing. My name is Bertie Perry. I'm a waitress. I am also, and I feel like this is important context, a chubby, cheerful, 31-year-old woman who has never once in her life caused a room to fall silent. So this was frankly a new experience for me. Every single made man in that social club was staring at me like I just lit a match in a room full of gasoline. And then the front door opened and Raphael Volpe walked in. The boss, the actual boss, whose actual chair I was sitting in with my shoe in my hand. And I understood with total clarity that I was probably about to die over a foot cramp. He looked at me. The whole room waited to see what he'd do. And Rafe Volpe smiled, just slightly, and said to a room full of the most dangerous men in the city, "Don't make her move." I didn't know it yet, but that man had just put a target on my back, saved my life, and kicked off the strangest, most dangerous love story the city of Pittsburgh has ever seen, all because I sat down in the wrong chair. And in about 3 weeks, the fact that I was the only person he ever let sit in that seat would turn out to be the one thing standing between Raphael Volpe and spending the rest of his life in a federal prison. Let me back up. You have to understand what the seat meant, or none of the rest of it lands. Marconi's was an old Italian social club in Bloomfield. Members only, red sauce, and older men, and a card game in the back that had been running uninterrupted since before I was born. And at the center of it, at the big table against the far wall, there was a chair. The boss's chair. Back to the wall. Clear sight line to the door. In that world, that seat isn't furniture. It's a throne, and it's a fortress, and it belongs to exactly one man. And in 3 generations of Marconi's, nobody had sat in that chair who wasn't the head of the Volpe family. Men had been hurt for lesser disrespect. A guy once put his coat on the back of it and didn't work in that neighborhood again. And I plopped down in it to fix my shoe. So when Rafe Volpe said, "Don't make her move," he wasn't being polite. He was making a statement to every man in that room, in a language they all spoke, and I didn't yet. This one is under my protection. This one is different. Nobody touches her. He'd taken the most sacred seat in his whole world, and he'd handed it, in front of everyone, to the waitress nobody had ever looked at twice. I found all this out later. In the moment, I just thought he was being nice about the shoe thing. "You could get up now," Rafe said gently, coming over. "Unless you're comfortable. You look comfortable." "I'm never getting up," I said, before my brain could stop my mouth. "Do you know how long I've been standing? This is the best chair I've ever sat in. I'm going to be buried in this chair." There was a horrified silence from the peanut gallery of made men, and Raphael Volpe threw his head back and laughed. A real laugh, loud, startled, the kind of laugh I'd learned he almost never let anybody see, and I watched every man in that room look at their boss like he'd sprouted a second head. "What's your name?" he asked me. "Bertie. Bertie." He said it like he was trying it out. "Keep the chair as long as you like, Bertie. It's the most interesting thing that's happened to it in years." After he walked off to the back room, the club slowly remembered how to breathe. An old man named Petey, Rafe's right hand, 60 if he was a day, with hands like ham hocks, came over and looked down at me in that chair with an expression I couldn't read at all. "You know what you're sitting in?" he said. Not a question. "A chair?" I offered. Petey studied me for a long moment. Then something in his craggy old face softened, just a little. 40 years I've known that man, he said quietly. I ain't heard him laugh like that since his mother was alive. He tapped the table twice, some old private blessing. "You keep making him laugh, sweetheart, and you keep that seat." And he walked away, and I sat there in the most dangerous chair in Pittsburgh with absolutely no idea what had just happened to my entire life. Here's the thing about me that nobody at Marconi's knew. I have very, very fast hands. For 10 years, before the knees and the economy and the general unkindness of the entertainment industry to women shaped like me, I was a magician's assistant. Not the sequins and smile kind. Well, okay, some of that, but I learned the craft. The great Alonzo taught me everything he knew, which was considerable. And I spent a decade doing close-up magic and stage illusion and learning the single most useful skill a working-class girl can have, which is how to make an object move from one place to another without a single human eye following it. I can palm a coin. I can lift a watch. I can make your own wallet appear behind your ear and hand it back to you before you know it left your pocket. I don't steal. Alonzo would have killed me. But I can, and there's a difference, and it's a difference that matters to this story. I loved it. I miss it every single day. When the act finally folded, I took the only job I could get, and I carried my fast hands into a waitressing gig at a social club, where I used them to do coin tricks for the regulars' grandkids and to carry 4 plates on one arm, and mostly to be invisible. Because that's the other thing a decade of stage magic teaches you: misdirection. How to move through a room without being seen. How nobody watches the help. How the eye slides right off a big, cheerful woman clearing plates. I made my whole life out of being unseen. I was good at it. I had no idea I was about to become the most seen woman in Pittsburgh. Being the woman Rafe Volpe let sit in his chair changed everything overnight. Suddenly, the made men who'd never learned my name were pulling out chairs for me. Suddenly, the whispers followed me across the floor. And suddenly, Rafe Volpe, who I'd served coffee to for a year without exchanging more than 10 words, was finding reasons to be at Marconi's on my shifts, and finding reasons to sit at the counter and talk to me, and finding, apparently, that he liked it. "You're not afraid of me," he observed one slow afternoon. Should I be? I was refilling the sugar caddies. "You've been nothing but polite." You gave me your chair. In my experience, the truly dangerous men are the ones that make a big show of how gentle they are. You don't make a show of anything. You just quietly are what you are. I shrugged. Also, I did a decade of dinner theater. I have seen men be scary for a living. You've got the real thing, so you don't have to perform it. It's honestly kind of restful. Rafe Volpe stared at me. That, he said slowly, is the single most perceptive thing anybody has said about me in 20 years. Who are you, Bertie? And because he'd been kind, and because I was lonely, and because there was something in his tired eyes that matched something in mine, I showed him. I reached over, and I plucked his own watch off his own wrist without him feeling a thing. And I held it up, and I watched the most dangerous man in Pittsburgh look from his bare wrist to the watch in my hand with an expression of pure, delighted astonishment. "I used to be a magician's assistant," I said. 10 years. Fast hands. It's my one and only superpower, and it's completely useless, and it's the thing I love most about myself. I handed his watch back. "Don't worry. I only steal from people I like." Rafe Volpe looked at me like I'd hung the moon. "Have dinner with me," he said. "Not here. Somewhere I can watch you do that all night." I should have said no. He was a Mafia boss. His whole world was danger. "Okay," I said. I have to tell you about the weeks that followed because they were the happiest of my life and because they're the reason everything else matters. Rafe Volpe courted me like a man from another century. He took me to dinners where I did coin tricks for the whole table, and he laughed every single time. He asked me about the magic, all of it, and he listened like it was the most important thing anyone had ever told him. And he never once, not one time, said anything about my body, except the night he said, quietly, "You move through a room like you're trying not to be seen." I don't understand it. You're the only thing in any room I can see. Nobody had ever said anything like that to me. Nobody. Why me? I asked him one night. You could have anyone. Somebody glamorous. Somebody who fits your world. "Everybody in my world wants something from me," he said. "Power. Money. Protection. And you stole my watch and gave it back and asked for nothing. You do magic tricks for children who can't tip you. You sat in the most dangerous chair in the city because your feet hurt and you weren't putting on a show. You just wanted to sit down." He took my hand. I've spent my whole life watching everybody's hands. Bertie, waiting to see who's reaching for a knife. You're the first person I ever met whose hands I wanted to watch for the joy of it. Do you know what that's worth to a man like me? I was falling. Completely, stupidly, joyfully. There was one night I'll keep forever. He'd had a hard day. I could see it, the particular set of his jaw when the weight of what he was got heavy, and I didn't ask about it because I have never once wanted to know the details of Rafe Volpe's business, and I never will. Instead, I sat him down at the kitchen counter after close, and I did the whole act for him. The entire thing. Every trick Alonzo ever taught me. The cups and balls, the card forces, the vanishing coins. An hour of pure wonder, just the two of us under the buzzing kitchen lights. And somewhere in the middle of it, this dangerous, exhausted man started laughing like a little boy, gasping, delighted, saying how did you do that? Do it again. And the weight came off his jaw, and for 1 hour the most feared man in Pittsburgh got to be nothing but a person watching magic. When I finished, he was quiet for a while. Then he said, "Nobody's shown me something just because it was beautiful in 15 years. Everything anybody's handed me in 15 years came with a bill attached. You took my hand. You just gave me an hour of my childhood back. I don't know how to pay you for that. That's the whole point of the gift, Rafe," I said. "You don't." And that is exactly when I noticed the new bartender. His name was Tino, and he'd started at Marconi's about the same time everything with Rafe began, and there was something wrong with his hands. I want you to understand, nobody else could have caught it. You need 10 years of close-up magic to catch it. But I watched Tino work the bar, and Tino had skills. Skills a bartender has no business having. He palmed things. He made passes, that little practice motion where an object moves from one hand to another and vanishes, the first thing Alonzo ever taught me. I watched him do a top change with a cocktail napkin, clean as anything, and my whole body went cold because a man does not learn a top change to fold napkins. Tino was a mechanic. Not a car mechanic, the other kind. A sleight-of-hand man. And a sleight-of-hand man behind the bar of a Mafia social club was doing exactly one of two things: skimming or planting. He wasn't skimming. I watched. The money was clean. He was planting. I told myself I was wrong. I wanted to be wrong. I liked Tino. He was funny. You remember my coffee order. So I did the thing Alonzo taught me to do when you think you've spotted another operator. I tested him. I accidentally left my tip jar full and unwatched at the end of the bar, the kind of easy lift no working grifter alive can resist. He didn't touch it, not a dollar. And that told me everything. A thief takes the easy money. A planner on a job never risks the heat for pocket change. Tino wasn't there to take something. Tino was there to leave something behind. And there's only one thing worth leaving behind in a Mafia social club, and only one man in that building it could possibly be meant for. I spent 3 nights watching him the way only another magician can watch, and I pieced it together, and when I finally understood the whole shape of it, I felt sick. Tino worked for Turi Amendola, the Volpe family's oldest rival, a cold, patient man who wanted Pittsburgh and had never been able to take it by force. So he wasn't going to take it by force. He was going to take it with a frame. Amendola had done a hit, a bad one, a murder that had the whole city's police looking for a gun. And the plan was elegant and vicious. Tino was going to plant that murder weapon, wiped and reprinted to implicate Rafe, at the boss's table at Marconi's. Then an anonymous tip. Then a raid. Then the most dangerous man in Pittsburgh goes away for the rest of his life for a murder he didn't commit. And Turi Amendola walks into the empty chair. And the plant had to go exactly one place to sell the frame. The boss's seat. The frame was set for a Friday. A big night. The club packed, the card game running, Rafe holding court. Tino would plant the gun at Rafe's table during the chaos. And the tip was timed so the raid would hit within the hour. There was just one thing Turi Amendola's careful, elegant plan had not accounted for. Me. Because that Friday, like most nights now, I was sitting in the chair beside Rafe's. And Rafe, in front of the whole club, had made a new tradition of it. Every night when I finished my shift, he'd pull out the chair next to his throne, the way you seat a queen, and I'd sit, and I'd do a little trick, and the whole room had gotten used to it. The waitress who sits at the boss's table. Nobody thought anything of it anymore. Which meant that when Tino came around the boss's table that Friday night with a bar rag and a nervous set to his shoulders and made his move to plant the gun. A beautiful move. Honestly, a clean drop in cover I'd have applauded in any other circumstance. He made it 3 feet away from the one person in the entire state of Pennsylvania who could see it happen. I saw the gun come out of the rag. I saw the drop. I saw him reach to slide it under the lip of the table at Rafe's seat, exactly where a search would find it. Time did the thing it does, went thick and slow, the The way it used to right before Alonzo would toss me out to the audience for the big reveal, that hyper-awake stillness where you can suddenly see everything. I saw the raid coming that I didn't even know was coming yet. I saw Rafe across the table, laughing at somebody's joke, 3 feet and an entire lifetime away from a cell. I saw my whole useless, glorious, misspent decade of fast hands, and I understood all at once that it had never been useless at all. It had been practice. For this. For exactly this 1 second. I had maybe half a heartbeat to decide. A girl with slower hands would have frozen. A girl without 10 years of Alonzo hollering commit. Birdie, half commitment is how you get caught would have hesitated. I didn't hesitate, and I did the only thing a girl with my particular skill set could do. I beat him to it. You want to know what 10 years of stage magic is actually for? It's for this. It's for the one moment in your whole life when everything depends on your hands being faster than someone else's and nobody watching. I dropped my napkin. Clumsy Birdie, knocking her napkin off the table, bending down to get it. And while every eye in the room did what every eye always does, which is politely look away from the fat girl bending over, my hand closed on that murder weapon a half second after Tino planted it. And it was gone up my sleeve into the fold of my apron, vanished before Tino's hand had even finished its cover motion. He straightened up thinking he'd done it. He had no idea the gun he just planted was already 40 inches away and traveling. And then I did the part I'm actually proud of. Because lifting the gun just saves Rafe. I wanted to end it. So as I came up with my napkin, apologizing, flustered, I brushed against Tino. The oldest move in the book, the bump, the thing pickpockets have done since there were pockets, and I did to Tino exactly what I'd done to Rafe's watch that first afternoon. I put something on him. I slid that murder weapon right into the deep back pocket of Tino's apron, and I patted his arm, and I said, "Sorry, hon, I'm such a klutz," and I walked away. The raid hit 20 minutes later. The cops tore that club apart. They searched Rafe's table down to the screws. They searched Rafe himself. They found exactly nothing because there was nothing to find, because the thing they'd been tipped to find was riding in the apron of a bartender named Tino, who went whiter and whiter as they worked their way down the bar, and who bolted for the door about 4 seconds before they got to him, which is a confession in any language. They caught Tino in the parking lot, and when they turned out his apron and that gun hit the pavement, I was watching through the kitchen pass, drying a glass I'd already dried 4 times, the very picture of a waitress who'd seen nothing and knew nothing, which, as far as the official record of that night, will forever show I was. Nobody deposes the help. Nobody asks the fat girl clearing plates what she saw. It's the same invisibility that had been the quiet grief of my whole life. And for the second time in a month, it turned out to be the best weapon in the building. They found the murder weapon on Turi Amendola's own man, in Rafe Volpe's club, with Amendola's fingerprints turning up on it under the fake ones, because Amendola, like every arrogant man in this story, had been too sure of himself to be careful. The frame didn't just fail. It reversed. It buried the man who built it. And not one single person in that room ever knew that a chubby waitress had won the whole war by dropping her napkin. Well, one person knew. Rafe figured it out that night, after the cops left, when he found me shaking in the kitchen, and I told him everything. The top change, the plant, the lift, the bump. And Rafael Volpe, the most dangerous man in Pittsburgh, sat down on an overturned bucket in the kitchen of his own social club and put his head in his hands and laughed until he cried. "You," he said, "stole a murder charge off my table and put it in the pocket of the man who planted it. With a napkin. As a distraction." He looked up at me, wet-eyed, wondering. I have 200 men and a war chest and a lifetime of instinct. And I would be in a cell right now for the rest of my life if a magician's assistant hadn't dropped her napkin at the right second. "Birdie, do you understand what you are?" "Fast hands," I said, shrugging, still shaking. "I told you. My one superpower. Completely useless." "Not useless," Rafe said. He stood up. He took my fast, shaking hands in his and held them like they were made of gold, which, to be fair, they'd just proven they basically were. "Never say that again. Those hands are the reason I have a life. Those hands are the most valuable thing in this entire city." He kissed them, one at a time, the way I'd once made his watch disappear. "Marry me, Bertie Perry. Come sit at my table for good. I've been trying to give you that chair since the day you sat in it." Turi Amendola's whole play collapsed with him in it. And what happened to Turi after his own murder weapon turned up in his own man's pocket is not a story for tonight. It's enough to say that a man who tries to frame the wrong boss and gets caught doing it does not get to stay a boss, and that Pittsburgh stayed Volpe territory, and that the name Amendola faded out of the city like cheap ink. And the made men of Marconi's, the ones who'd stared in horror the day I sat in the sacred chair. Well, word gets around in a small world like that. Word gets around about who dropped a napkin and saved the boss from a life sentence. By the end of that month, there wasn't a man in that club who didn't stand up when I walked in. I'd gone from the invisible waitress to the woman who'd outmagicked a murder frame in front of God and the Pittsburgh PD, and I have to tell you, after 31 years of the world sliding its eyes right off me, I did not hate it. But that's not where the story ends. It ends at Marconi's, at the big table in the back, at that chair. Except now there are two. Rafe had a second chair made, the twin of his own, carved to match, set right beside it at the head of the table. Not a chair next to the throne. A second throne. He put it there himself, in front of the whole club, and he said, in that language they all speak, the one I finally understand now. This seat is hers. Forever. She sits where I sit. She is not beside the boss. She is one of them. I did a coin trick at our wedding. Of course I did. I pulled a quarter out of the priest's ear, and the whole church lost it. 200 of the most dangerous people in Pennsylvania howling with laughter in the pews, and Rafe laughing hardest of all. And I thought, I spent 10 years making things disappear for strangers who forgot my face by the parking lot. And now I've got a room full of people who will never forget it, and a man who watches my hands for the joy of it, and a seat, my own seat, at the head of the whole entire table. The girl who made her whole life out of being unseen. Seen at last. In the best seat in the house. You know, Rafe told me that night, at our table, at our two thrones, the day you sat in my chair, everybody in that room thought you'd made the worst mistake of your life. I remember, I said, you could have warned me it was a big deal. I could have, he agreed. But then you'd have gotten up. And I'd already decided about 4 seconds in that I never wanted you to move again. He raised his glass. Don't make her move. Best thing I ever said. And I've never had to move since. I just pull up my chair right next to his every single night, and I make something wonderful appear out of thin air for a room full of people who are so glad, so unbelievably glad that I sat down in the wrong seat. So that's the story of the chubby waitress who sat in the wrong chair. The invisible girl with the fast hands, who dropped one napkin at the right second and saved a king from a life behind bars. I want to ask you something tonight, and be honest with me down in the comments. Birdie spent 10 years being the person nobody watches, and it turned out that being overlooked was the exact thing that made her powerful, because nobody ever sees the person they've decided doesn't matter. So here's my question for you. Has the world ever underestimated you? Has anyone ever looked right past you and been so wrong to do it? Tell me that story. I read every single one, and somebody scrolling by tonight needs the reminder that being overlooked is not the same thing as being powerless. And if Birdie reminded you that the person nobody notices is so often the one holding the winning hand, do me one small favor before you go. Tap that like button, share this with someone the world's been too quick to look past, and subscribe because the next story might just be the best one yet, and you will not believe who walks through that door. I'll see you there.